right, welcome everybody to the June 2022 edition of Streets for All Happy Hour. We're very excited to have the Vice Mayor of Burbank, Konstantine Anthony, on with us. Before we get to our conversation with Konstantine, we're going to give you an update on our state measures, give you an update on our ballot measure, do an endorsements roundup, including some hot off the press results from yesterday's election, talk about the Culver City Pride Ride, a few wins of the month, and we will get to our conversation with Konstantine. Our icebreaker, which is very timely, is which candidate were you most excited to vote for yesterday? So I'm going to turn it over to Bubba, who's going to answer that question and give us an update on state measures. Bubba.
Thanks, Michael. Definitely Lola Smallwood Cuevas. I'm not in LA City. I'm in Culver City, so I was able to vote for her for state senate and was very excited to do so. And that's on theme because we're about to talk state measures. If you go to the next slide, we are about midway through the cycle right now. So a lot of our bills have passed the first house. So you have to go through the policy committees, the fiscal committee, and then that down to the floor for the vote on that house. And you repeat the cycle again for the second house and go to the governor's desk. So we are at that middle row on the left side right now, the second house policy committee. And we will be done with this entire legislative session by the end of September. If you go to the next slide, we have a new website that we launched recently that we've told you about, but yeah, it's just a good reminder that we have some new bills on the website. So go to streetsforall.org/state and check out all the bills, 20 bills that we've endorsed, many of which we've actually had a hand in writing this session. So you can see our whole slate there. And if you go to the next slide, we also have a report card, a legislator mobility report card that we launched last month, where you can look at all of your legislators and see how they voted in the 2021 legislative session on the bills that we care about, transportation justice bills that we endorsed last year. So you can see who got an extraordinary all the way down to A, B, C, D, F. So it's a really fun tool. If you go to the next slide, we have a very exciting announcement that we have 17 bills out of the 20 bills that we endorsed that made it through the first house. We're really excited about this. So we have an 85% survival rate so far. And on the next slide, we'll tell you about some of the bills that we're pouring one out for this evening. Casualties of the session, AB 2336 is the bill to create a pilot program for speed safety cameras, automated speed enforcement, or ASE as it's called. And this is a really important tool to be able to slow drivers down. They've tried it in DC, and studies have shown that it really slows drivers down really effectively. A bill to count all of the bus shelter facilities in the state that would eventually allow us to have another bill that would actually fund a lot of new bus shelters because we've first counted them and seen what our needs are. And then AB 2388 would have required driver's license period, a provisional period for 18 to 21-year-old new drivers, because it turns out drivers 16 to 18 are actually a lot safer than drivers 18 to 21 because they've had this provisional period, which is kind of surprising that the younger drivers, even though they're younger, because they've had this training, are actually safer. So these three bills died in the Appropriations Committee because of their fiscal impacts. And we're hoping we're not going to give up the fight on any of these, and we'll hopefully bring them up in the next session or try to get some support rallied around them in other bills. And on the next slide, we're going to talk about a new bill that we just announced that we are super excited about. Y'all probably remember when Governor Newsom announced his proposal to give people relief from rising gas prices by proposing a $400 per car up to $800 subsidy for car owners. And a lot of people pointed out that's kind of ass backwards. It's funding car ownership, which we know cars are the number one, or at least single occupancy vehicles are the number one cause of greenhouse gas emissions in California. We know that they're the number one cause of death from children 5 to 19. So we know car ownership is definitely part of the problem and not something we want to be subsidizing, but we still want to give people relief. And so we heard a lot of talk online about hey, how come I don't get incentivized or rewarded for doing the societally beneficial thing of not owning a car at all? You're not contributing to traffic, you're not contributing to greenhouse gases, you are not creating a safety hazard for people. So if you go to the next slide, we ran with this bill. We created a bill that would create a tax rebate for owning fewer cars than adults in your household. So if you have, if you're one person in your tax household and you own 0 cars, you get a $2,500 rebate. And this is up to 3 rebates of $2,500. So if you're a 3-person tax household, 3 adults, then you would have a $7,500 tax rebate if you were car free. And it works the same if you have like 2 cars but 3 adults in your tax household, you get a $2,500 rebate. We're very excited about this. We recently announced, and we got a really big response online, and we got some press around it. People seem very excited about the prospect of California funding the future essentially, and incentivizing people to make the more responsible choice if they can, obviously, if they can. So yeah, we're really excited about SB 457. It's authored by Senator Portantino, who we are sponsoring now 5 bills with this session. So we're very grateful to his office for working with us. On the next slide, we would love to have your help. You can tell that I don't know what's going to come on the next slide. I just say next slide and then, oh, okay, that's what it is. But we would love to have your help on the state team. We could definitely, use more advocates. So if you have some spare time, please join us, streetsforall.org/get-involved. And you can subscribe to our socials at Streets for All. And you can also buy our merch, which is super cool. Josh designed it. I have the hat and the shirt. They're really fun. And all the proceeds go to safer, more sustainable and equitable transportation in California. And I'll pass it to Michael for Healthy Streets.
Thanks, Bubba. I think the person I was most excited to vote for yesterday was Kenneth Mejia. Because it's been a long time since the city has had a controller that's actually a CPA and knows what they're talking about. And also because I didn't think that Paul Koretz was very qualified for the job. So there's obviously going to be a runoff in November, but it's really exciting to see Kenneth and his campaign advance. So Healthy Streets LA is our ballot measure for the city of Los Angeles. It is just a reminder on what it is. It would mandate the city of LA automatically implement its own already adopted mobility plan 2035 whenever it repaves streets. They have implemented 3% in 7 years. At that rate, it will take the city 200 years to implement its 20-year plan. This changes it all, and they would not be legally allowed to repave a street without putting in the bike lane, the bus lane, the crosswalk, the safety improvements that the mobility plan calls for. We have been getting a ton of press on this, including yesterday. There was an editorial in the LA Times that says, is LA getting serious about safer streets, which also talked about Council President Nuri Martinez's effort on this, which I'll talk about in a minute. And I thought this was kind of fun for everybody to look at. In April of 2022, during happy hour, this is what our coalition looked like. And we had 7 neighborhood councils. In May, the list looked like that. And in June, this month, we have ran out of space. So there are now multiple neighborhood councils on one line, and we're at 41 neighborhood councils. We are not aware of any other issue in the city of Los Angeles that's ever been agreed to by close to half of all of the neighborhood councils in the city. So really excited, and a testament to how much people care about this. So where we're at now is we are on track to submit to the city on June 24th. So just a couple weeks away. We will be submitting over 100,000 signatures that have been collected by countless volunteers, paid canvassers. We have a great field team, and it's been a journey, but we are very close to being there. I also wanted to acknowledge the motion introduced by the council president. It instructs the city attorney to draft an ordinance based on Healthy Streets LA. It directs city departments to work together on implementation. It goes beyond the mobility plan. So it includes street trees, sidewalks, bus shelters, other things that people care about that aren't included in the mobility plan. And it calls for implementation based on equity. So we're very grateful for her leadership here and excited to continue to work with her as we also get to council soon, probably by mid-August. Healthy Streets LA will be at council. So you can still go to our website, not too late to gather signatures, collect signatures on a paid basis or volunteer, and or sign the petition. With that, I'm going to turn over to Katrina to talk about the Pride Ride.
Thanks, Michael. Hi, everyone. I would say that the candidate I was most excited to vote for, I was also going to say Kenneth Mejia, but Michael took that. So the other campaign that I was really excited to back and get behind was Scott Epstein's campaign for CD5. The race is still coming in, but I was really impressed by the campaign that Scott ran and the way that he reached out to, renters, working people, and other sort of traditionally underrepresented populations in CD5. And I have hope for the long-term vision of what the West Side is going to look like in the future. I'm here to talk about the Culver City Pride Ride and Rally. This is an event being put on by our friends in Culver City, combination of, the work that Bubba does with Bike Culver City, as well as its own entity, however, and Streets for All. We're here just promoting it. We'll have a table there. We encourage everyone to save the date if they want to attend. It's going to be Sunday, June 26th. Please RSVP for the bike ride part of it throughout the residential neighborhoods in Culver City, as well as a lot of the new multimodality infrastructure in downtown Culver City. And you can also join for the rally, which will be on Main Street in the downtown area, and that's at 11. We really hope to see as many people as possible there. It should be a very fun, colorful, family-friendly time, but also a protest talking about, the intersection between our identities and how that means that the way we live our lives can change in the context of cities. If you go to the next slide, I'm also going to tell you all about our endorsements for the primary cycle. For those of you who haven't seen the results yet, we're really pleased to offer our congratulations to the following candidates who were endorsed, who were either advancing to the general election or won their races outright. And that's so far, all votes are still coming in. The few races that have been called include Board of Supervisors District 1, Hilda Solis, Council District 11, Aaron Darling's going to go to the runoff. For the city controller race, as we mentioned, Kenneth Mejia is going to go to the runoff. And additionally, on the next slide, we have some state candidates. In Senate District 28, Lola Smallwood Cuevas is going to the runoff. In Assembly District 52, Mia Levis Porter is going to the runoff. And in Assembly District 44, Laura Friedman won her race outright. I believe there are a couple more endorsed candidates for state, but we're watching who are very close to either advancing to the runoff or winning, but we're watching them and stay tuned. We had a few additional endorsements that were late breaking in order to ensure that they get the credit that our other endorsed candidates did. I wanted to talk about them here. We endorsed Kenneth Mejia for city controller, as you see. Next, we also endorsed Brian Odega in CD15. We also endorsed for Congress, Shervin Azami, Dr. Daniel Lee, and David Kim for Congress. And finally, for Glendale City Council, we endorsed our Nigerian, and I think we're waiting on the results of some of these races to see if some of those candidates advance to the runoff or not. You can check out all the candidates' answers as well as all of our endorsed candidates at streetsforall.org/voter guide. We're going to be making more materials for the general election, so stay tuned. Next, I'm going to turn it over to talk about the wins of the month to Bubba.
Thanks, Katrina. Yeah, please do come to the Culver City Pride Ride and Rally. We would love to have you. There's a link in the chat. I wanted to just touch on briefly a piece of good news out of Culver City. We've been, in the midst of a really significant effort to get parking reform in Culver City and actually address one of the root causes of, higher housing prices, car dependence, sprawl, more greenhouse gas emissions, our onerous parking requirements. So we had already gone to the Committee on Housing and Homelessness, and we had presented a presentation to them on the impact of parking minimums, and they had recommended abolishing parking minimums and instituting parking maximums near transit. And in the span of a single planning commission meeting, and the planning commission, is responsible for, planning into the future. All kind of projects have to go through them, and they're traditionally a more conservative body. And we kind of packed the house with advocates and told our story of what parking requirements do, what they do to a city and how they negatively impact our day-to-day lives. And we did have some amount of pushback, but we ended up getting the committee, the planning commission, to recommend the same, the abolishment of parking minimums and institution of parking maximums near transit. So now that goes to the city council, and they're going to hopefully take the advice of the two committees that have already given them this recommendation. So a really big milestone was reached here. The fight's not done, but just good news in general. And I think Josh is next with Destruction for Nada.
Thank you, Bubba. This election cycle, I was really excited to vote for David Kim for Congress. He's a really great progressive environmentalist with a really solid transportation platform. Really exciting. He might not make it, but he's going out of the primary, it looks like, so we'll see. This is Destruction for Nada. If you go to the next slide, this is a coalition effort to stop all freeway widening projects in Los Angeles County. We just celebrated our 1-year anniversary of launching the campaign. So if you go to the next slide, these are some of the quick wins that we've gotten just locally with Metro. They've indefinitely delayed the I-605 widening. They passed a motion, so funding earmarked for freeways can be spent on active transportation projects and transit. Their highway department was folded into general planning, which will allow for more multimodal projects and collaboration across the agency. And Adela Ansari is gone, who was the head of the highway department, and he fought activists and didn't really acknowledge the impacts on VMT that the highways would cause. We had 2 cool wins last week, if you go to the next slide, which is that Metro officially killed the 710 freeway expansion, which went through the diesel death corridor, really horrible impacts to those communities. It was the most expensive freeway widening project the Metro had planned. So that's really cool to see that gone. And then AB 1778 passed. This is Christina Garcia's bill. Bubba mentioned this. This will stop all freeway widening projects in the state of California. That made it out of the assembly. It's going to the Senate now. And we're excited to support that. Now I'm going to pass it to Katrina to talk about slow street wins.
Thanks, Josh. So one small exciting win that is coming out of our efforts is LADOT's continued installation of permanent slow streets. So slow streets back in 2020 was one of Streets for All's signature projects. We worked with, the neighborhood councils and LADOT and ultimately the mayor's office to get this project off the ground after a number of other cities started to institute other similar slow streets type of programs in order to give people outside space during the real height of the pandemic and pandemic related restrictions. So now a lot of this very popular infrastructure is being converted into permanent infrastructure. Most recently, there were 2 new roundabouts installed in Koreatown and Hollywood. This image that you see here is from Hollywood. And of course, I'd be remiss not to mention that this intersection is also one of the ones that was identified by Crosswalk Collective, Korea urbanism group that you might have heard about installing crosswalks around. Of course, those are not here at this point, but we look forward to additional safety infrastructure coming out of LADOT since there's a lot of demonstrated interest in additional crosswalks and other additional slow streets infrastructure. And finally, I'll turn it back over to Michael.
Thanks, Katrina. For our final win of the month, we had a big budget win. So LADOT in the mayor's budget was in pretty bad shape. They were getting no new active transportation positions. There was no restoration of the the volunteer retirement positions they lost during the pandemic. And partly thanks to your efforts, tremendous amount of advocacy, they City Council voted to expand the speed hump program, which is one of the most popular programs in the city. LADOT got 18 new active transportation positions. This is the single biggest increase of active transportation positions in the history of LADOT in a single year. And they got the restoration of the 33 positions they lost during COVID. And they got a CTO, which was one of Seleta Reynolds, general manager's top priority. So we went from the mayor's budget, which was pretty awful on all this stuff, to the city council's budget, which was great for LADOT. So really excited, and kudos to everyone that called in and wrote in. All right, so quick sneak preview for next month. We're going to have Supervisor Solis on, who's of course also a Metro board member, and that will be July 13th at 5 p.m. So now, really excited to get to our conversation with Konstantine. Konstantine, thank you for being so patient. We had a lot to go over this month. I'll go ahead and stop the screen share and let me get you set up. So Konstantine Anthony is the current Vice Mayor of Burbank and chair of the California Democratic Party's Disabilities Caucus. He is a dues-paying member of DSA-LA, SEIU 2015, and SAG-AFTRA. In 2020, he became the first ever openly autistic elected official in California's history. Konstantine, thank you so much for being here. I am going to pass it over to Bubba, who's going to kick it off with our first question.
Thank you for having me.
Michael, could you grab the first question? I don't have that live right now.
I will handle the first question.
Is obviously who was I excited to vote for?
That is the first question. Go ahead.
And that was Caroline Menjivar, who's running for state senate in Burbank, LGBTQ Marine Corps veteran, worked as a EMT and worked for Nira Martinez and Eric Garcetti. She's really great. So I was excited to vote for her.
Did she make it?
She did too. Well, it's in the runoff as top
in
two.
the runoff. Great.
Yeah.
Okay, so our first question is about Burbank Complete Streets.
Yeah, I do have it now.
Bubba, go ahead.
I gotcha. Okay, so we got Burbank adopted a complete streets plan in June 2020, but the implementation has been slow. What do you see as the highest priorities in the plan, and how can its implementation be expedited?
Well, Burbank, to start off, Burbank is facing the same things that a lot of other cities are facing coming out of the pandemic, which is a lack of hiring, backed up paperwork and all of that stuff. However, our city specifically is extra backlogged because in 2018, there was a big push to pass the Measure P sales tax. It was a big infrastructure sales tax. However, in order to do so, well, it depends who you talk to. I didn't think it needed to be done. But at the time, the council who was elected as the body decided that it would be wise to do a hiring freeze because they were under budget, to show the constituents that, hey, we're doing everything we can to tighten our belts and we're still not meeting our needs, so you got to pass the sales tax. I believe at the time that it was political theater, it didn't need to happen. For the 4 to 6 months that hiring freeze was going on, our city got backlogged. Now, any other time, most people would think, oh, okay, we get backlogged a little bit. We finally caught up right at the end of 2019. And so right when we were about to make some progress on moving stuff forward, especially with this new infrastructure tax, 2 months later, COVID hit. And so we were already swamped. We were already under on bodies to work at the city. So we were behind the 8 ball when COVID hit. So we fell further behind than most other cities because we were already behind. We're still playing catch up. There's no way anyone could have predicted this back in 2018. But that's what happens when you take those gambles, when you do show more than substance. And so we are where we are because of some, I believe, bad decisions made 4.5 years ago. However, we're getting there. We, in this year's budget, we are finally, for the first time in 13 years, the city of Burbank is in the black, which is incredible. So we are actively hiring. We are making a push to hire people in planning, in plan check, in the building departments to get permits and construction and all of that stuff done as fast as possible. So that is our main priority. So yeah, you are correct. It has been slow. It's slower than I would have liked. It's slower than what other cities are doing, and that's because there was a, institutional problem that had been lasting for many years. I'm confident that we are going to catch up. We'll catch up soon. In the next 6 months, I believe, probably the start of the year 2023, we're going to be where we need to be, and pushing ahead. So
Thank you.
to answer your question, the number one thing we can do is hire staff.
I think that's a job opportunity. People go to the website and apply.
Yeah.
Over to Josh.
Thanks. So I have a question about the Burbank Channel Bikeway. Burbank recently opened the Channel Bikeway, a great Class 1 separated bikeway. What is your opinion of this project? How can we get many more like it in the city of Burbank?
Sir, how can we get more of the Channel Bikeway in Burbank?
Yeah, I mean, more of the Channel bike lane or more projects similar to it. Yeah.
Oh yeah. So I'm not sure. I think all of our projected bike paths are in the final complete streets proposal, but I don't know if each of the final phases made it into what got passed at city council, because it's moving in phases. There is the end phase, I believe it's phase 3. Don't quote me on that, but I believe it's phase 3 of our bike path master plan has a full connectivity of all of our major bikeways so that you can get from one end of Burbank to the other without stepping off a bike path. Maybe crossing a street here or there, but pretty much a direct bike path the whole way. A couple of, I believe there's like 3 or 4 spots that where we try to make those connections are public right-of-way issues. I can say the number one problem, the biggest one, is connecting the Chandler bike path to across the bridge. And there's a little strip of land that's owned by Caltrans between Magnolia and Mariposa, basically behind the Hobby Lobby there. And you can see it. There's actually old train tracks just sitting there. It's like a quarter-mile stretch of dead train tracks that don't go anywhere. They end in one end and they start here. It's like an anachronistic throwback from the 1960s. And so what the city is trying to do is get Caltrans to either A, sell, or B, lease that land to the city so that we can tear up those tracks and build a bike path, a quarter-mile bike path, which would connect our 2 major bike lanes traveling through the city. I don't know how many of you guys I've talked to about this, but I say this again and again. Caltrans is the worst. I don't know how you guys feel about them, but they were originally designed to build freeways. That's how they were constructed. That's the way they were designed and implemented. And it is 2022 and almost nothing about their structure or setup has changed since the 1960s, where they were all pro-car, pro-freeway expansion nonsense. And so the issue that we have is, and this is the issue a lot of cities have, is how do you get Caltrans that has a lot of these public right-of-way pieces? It's like little floating bits of land in between highway and bikeways and stuff. How do you get Caltrans to move their butt and get it done? And they have no internal motivation to do that. You come to them with a freeway expansion, they're like, oh yeah, bulldoze all those houses along the 605. That's exactly what we want to do. Let's get it done. Let's get it done. It's okay. Give me a quarter mile of an old train line that you have. And they're like, who are you? Sorry, new phone. Who's this? It's ridiculous. It's ridiculous. But we're getting there. We have our state reps putting pressure and getting people involved and slowly moving it. It's negotiation. That's what it is. It's perseverance and negotiation, and you just got to keep people on it. And I mean, at the end of the day, honestly, my big ask from the state, from any state reps or from the governor, is to just completely redo the very structure of how Caltrans is run and operated and implemented. Because it's still this old freeway machine. It's an old freeway machine trying to build bike channels and trying to build trains and trying to, you know, improve the riverbanks along the other river. Anyway, it's a mess. It's a mess.
I've got the next question, which is a little bit of a spicier one, about high-speed rail. So Burbank has been
You're gonna get me fired, aren't you?
No, we'll see what you say. So we're curious. We're very curious because, you know, Burbank's been taking kind of an oppositional stance to the California high-speed rail project. We saw the news that in January, the city council sent a letter disputing the environmental impact report and expressing concerns about negative impacts the train might have on the Burbank community. And separately, we also saw the news that in February, the Hollywood Burbank Airport sued to try to delay the project. Of
Who
course,
said the first letter you said?
we saw in the news that the city council sent a letter disputing the environmental impact report, but
Oh,
you
that
know,
was from us.
yeah, well, in
was-
general, you know, we support high-speed rail as part of a broader suite of transportation policies.
Mhm.
Would love to hear from you. What do you think, and what would it take for Burbank City Council or you specifically to become a real ally of HSR?
That letter, that was back in January. Was that this year?
That's what we saw.
Yeah, okay. I know the letter you're talking about. I'm trying to figure out how I can phrase this. So there is, I'm going to speak generally about politics when you are the minority voice in a given body. Sometimes there are opportunities to take a principled stance and vote no on something and dig your heels in and shout to the crowds because you know, no matter what you do, nothing's going to change. And that's important. And I believe in those kinds of protest votes. But every so often something comes along that you don't agree with. But if you go along with the majority, you have some input to mitigate the impending disaster that you see coming. I'm not going to say anything specific, but there have been often times that I will vote along with the majority to make sure that my voice is included on an issue that I don't necessarily agree with. And that hopefully sometime in the future, if the body were to change, we could change our stance. High-speed rail is one of those issues where some people absolutely love it and some people absolutely hate it, and anyone in the middle is trying to figure out why is either side so passionate about this. I believe that high-speed rail is so overdue in this state and in this country that we have lost the very nerve to push for it, that it is so far gone. A lot of people, a lot of folks in our spaces, pro-transit, pro-mobility people, have given up on the idea and want to let it go. I'm not one of those people. I still think that we have an opportunity to implement stuff that other countries have been doing since the turn of the century. And the bodies, the elected bodies in local and county and state governments across the country still think in a very, I don't want to say conservative mindset. I think it's an old world mindset, because there's a lot of people who are very pro-transit, and then you come to them with high-speed rail and they go, why do we need that when we can just move people along with a BRT or a heavy loaded train? And it's like, I mean, you're talking about, you know, a biplane versus a jet. This, like, the technology has changed, you know, and so I'm doing what I can. There are ways of critiquing the environmental impact report. There's ways of critiquing the construction and where you're going to put stuff and nitpicking things that sometimes are helpful and other times get in the way. But what I hope to do is make sure that folks like myself, folks like you guys, are in the conversation rather than simply outside protesting on how terrible the decisions are happening. in the doors.
Thanks.
I know
Dr.
it's not,
Michael.
a great answer.
Well,
Was
I
it-
think it's the next question.
That was an interesting answer. So you knew this was going to come up, the NoHo-Pasadena BRT. So in April, you voted with the rest of City Council to ask Metro for mixed flow, non-dedicated bus lanes as part of the NoHo-Pasadena BRT corridor project. We know that buses are slowed down by car traffic, and mixed flow lanes jeopardize increases in bus ridership and could jeopardize future BRT projects in the county. Can you explain your reasoning? And that of City Council, how do you see the BRT integrated into Burbank, and what opportunities do you see, and how does this all play out?
So that vote, I see that vote as a gamble. And it was a Hail Mary pass to Metro, who promised us full dedicated lanes with signal prioritization and a station atop the Olive Street Bridge. Those were the three major components that I signed on to 5 years ago when I was on the Transportation Commission. What was proposed a little over a year ago was one lane of dedicated bus lane, meaning one direction, and we got to pick which direction, and no signal prioritization and no station atop the Olive Street Bridge. Needless to say, I was disappointed and a little miffed because I feel like I got bait and switched. And so I joined in with the letter this year with my council members. I didn't agree that the mixed flow was the best option. I actually believe keeping the parking and getting rid of one lane of travel was the easiest and fastest because you don't have to resize the lanes. For those of you who don't know, parking lanes are different sizes than driving lanes. So the cheapest and fastest way to implement the BRT was to get rid of a driving lane. However, the majority of City Council did not agree with me on that, and that's fine. And again, once you're in the minority, taking a principal stand isn't going to really do anything. However, by joining in to that majority vote, I was able to put in comments and critiques about the Olive Street Bridge station. And so by relinquishing my vote to the majority, I was able to get in some good critiques. And now the discussion at Metro is, where do we find the money to move the station from Lake Street back to the Olive Street Bridge? And hopefully that's the conversation that moves forward. The comment letter that we ended up sending, I'm proud to say, does have a caveat that if Metro hits a certain number of riderships per day, that the City Council of Burbank does agree that we should go to dedicated lane. That was not in the comment letter when it originally came to us. We had to fight tooth and nail to put that in. However, if I'd have taken a principled stance and said no, then that caveat would not be in there. So there's little stuff that, you know, voting no on something completely removes you from that conversation. And hopefully, as we see the BRT come through, because remember, if you guys notice, the approved plan, the approved EIR for from Metro does not have mixed flow, so they didn't listen to us. But at the end of the day, hopefully in the future, if we start looking at those numbers, we can go in and change council policy to simply accept a lower number for that caveat, for that exemption. And I believe once we hit that number, then everything will be hunky-dory. And, you know, we can go back and look and say, okay, we were wrong on the numbers, but we work with Metro. We're going to get our station bridge. Okay, let's get signal prioritization. So it's all this dance, right? It's a negotiation. It's a give and take. You don't get everything you want. You don't get most of what you want, let's be honest, but you fight for the little things that you can get and you keep trying to move that needle.
So just a quick follow-up. It's a chicken and egg, right? If it's based on ridership numbers and it doesn't have dedicated lanes, the ridership number is going to be lower. So it's kind of a circular argument. But
It is
also,
a circular argument, but you can whittle away at that number. And that way, and you can slowly get a dinosaur to lay an egg first, and then you get a chicken out of it.
the other thing I wanted to point out is in the staff report, I'm reading it right now verbatim. It says this option converts one traffic lane in each direction, not just one direction, each direction to bus lanes between Buena Vista Street and Lake Street. So it wasn't just one direction, they were proposing both directions.
Right, and that we were glad that, well, I was glad that finally came forward. When they originally proposed it, it was one lane, and I was a little upset. And I guess, that carried over a little bit also with the Olive station.
So how do you see this playing out? Because like you said, Metro didn't listen to Burbank and it ruled out mixed flow, but they don't own the right of way. It's Burbank's right of way.
Still gotta get
So-
permits from the city.
Right. So what's going to happen?
Well, my guess is that there's going to be an election before anything has to be decided. And I'll leave it at that.
You're hoping for a change. Got it. We'll leave it at that. Over to Bubba.
Yeah, so my question is, if, Burbank is a smaller city and it's bordering both other smaller cities and LA, a very large city. We often view transportation with a regional lens. So what role do you think Burbank has when it comes to regional transportation and allowing streets to be used to connect transportation systems, bus, bike, and rail, to service the greater regional good, not just the hyperlocal?
Yeah, well, you forget that Burbank is not just bus, bike, and rail. It's planes too. We have our own airport. So we are this major transportation hub that people in the city simply forget about. They don't want to think about it. They think it's a sleepy town with just a bunch of single family homes and good schools and a quiet little neighborhood. But in reality, we get a lot of traffic through here, not just the 5 and the 134, but we have the Metrolink. We have, the airport, the bike channel. All of it is huge components of moving people through the San Fernando Valley into the San Gabriel Valley and back down into LA. It's hard to explain it to people who have been here a long time and only drive. Folks who don't travel, folks who don't take the bus or ride a bike. And it's so obvious to folks who move here from cities that have those multimodal forms of transportation. My fiance is from Chicago. She's like, what? People don't take the train or the bus? I don't understand. I ride my bike all the time. She doesn't even own a car. She lives in Burbank, doesn't own a car. And people are like, how do you get through Burbank without a car? I'm like, it's so easy. It's, I got a walkability score in my apartment of like 83, 84. And as you get closer to downtown, it's in the 90s. That's really good for an LA area city. But there are also huge swaths of Burbank where the walk score is in the 30s. And there's no bus or bike even nearby. You got to walk 2 whole city blocks to get there. So there's a lot we can do. It's an ongoing conversation. The demographics in Burbank are changing, and I think that's the biggest factor in what we're talking about in this multimodal change. The younger generation, millennials and younger, just don't want to drive anymore. We hate it. We absolutely despise getting in a car, maintaining it, paying for these ridiculous gas prices, remembering where you parked. And things are changing because of demand, right? I don't even have to really push for any of this stuff anymore. People are asking for quieter, slower, safer streets with walkability, shade, retail shops in the front, no giant parking lots, more buses, more frequent buses, more bike lanes, wider bike lanes, protected bike lanes. These are the asks that are coming to us at the city council. And so it's gotten, I'll tell you, in the last 5 years, I was on Transportation Commission starting in 2017. The last 5 years, I have seen it become so much easier to say yes, yes, yes to all of this stuff. So it's changing. I'm not exactly sure if I answered your question or not.
I think you did.
You did, yeah.
It's really, I said this earlier, it's really hot in here. My AC is broken. I'm wearing a t-shirt. It's like,
Why aren't you wearing a suit?
that's a good question. That's a good question. It's like you almost know that I always wear a suit.
So let's talk about the airport. Burbank is really unique that it has its own airport. The airport is served by both Amtrak and Metrolink, which is another unique thing. But the Metrolink station isn't exactly convenient to the terminal. And San Fernando Road has no bike lanes. Surrounding roads have some bike lanes, but they're mostly unprotected. I think one of the reasons why people love Burbank Airport is it's so much smaller and accessible, and especially easy for day trips or just one night. How do you think the airport can evolve to get people to and from the airport without having to use a car? And I recognize that sounds crazy for a lot of people, but for a smaller town with a smaller airport, there's a real opportunity there.
Well, I will say this. I took a Lyft to the airport one time. My flight was at 10:20. I left the house at 10:03. My Lyft picked me up at 10:03. And I got in my seat at 10:18. So, I mean, it's
Just like LAX.
just like LAX. So it is a pretty small airport, and it's pretty accessible. We do have the Metro Micro, which has been helping for that, which is still a car. And I guess your question is, how do you get to the airport without a car? That one's tough. Free shuttle services is one thing. The Metro, the way it's set up, the Metro South is way too far away. Even the Metro North. We originally had a shuttle service from the Metrolink North Station going to the Burbank Airport, and I'm not exactly sure what happened to that funding during the pandemic, but that was supposed to be maintained. I'm gonna have to look into that because you make me think about that.
European cities do these crazy things where the station is actually in the airport for the train.
What? That's nuts.
And
You mean you can just walk there? I know.
You
It's
could
so
just
ridiculous.
you could just take the train to the airport, not to a shuttle to the airport. And I was just curious if, LAA is building a people mover at LAX. Like, is there an opportunity there to connect the two train stations and potentially high-speed rail if the airport stops suing the project into the terminal?
It's funny because the airport, like, we don't have direct oversight over the airport. It's us, it's Glendale, it's Pasadena all together, and they're kind of a little independent. But the airport rebuild is going to move the entire terminal further north. So it is going to be much closer. Yeah, and Tom was pointing it out here. It's going to be much closer to the Metrolink North Station, which apparently the high-speed rail, the proposed station is right between the two. So it is going to be walkable once the rebuild comes through. And of course, no discussion that we can have now can be implemented because we're going to tear down the whole terminal anyways. So moving it further north, getting it closer to the Metrolink North Station, and then implementing some sort of, I agree, a people mover would probably be best. I don't like the idea of a shuttle because that's kind of a waste of space and roadway. If you build the direct line, that's the way to do it. I know I used to take the, have you ever been to Oakland Airport to get to the BART station? It's got this cool people mover that goes over the mall. It's pretty far away though, but this would be much closer. And so, yeah, one of the things we just appointed a new airport commissioner just a couple months ago, who's a friend of mine on the airport, on the transportation committee. When I first joined Transportation Commission, he was chair of the commission. And he's a big transportation enthusiast. So yeah, I think people mover is absolutely the way to go for that, so that people can get right from the Metrolink North Station. I would go so far as to say connect it to the Metrolink South Station so that you can go to either one. That way, if you're coming in from the other rail, you don't have to go to downtown Burbank and then hitch a ride back. You can get off on either Metrolink stop, one obviously much closer, and that's the one you'd want to take if you were coming from downtown. But the other one would also be able to get to that people mover as well in a big loop, or just a back and forth. I mean, I don't have any concrete answers for you. It's all in flux. Again, like you said, there's a bunch of lawsuits, which I think is just wasting our time, and people, flexing their territorial muscles. Like, well, hey, you can't come in and tell me what to do. And it's like, just work together, please, for everybody. I don't know. I just don't get it sometimes.
We have one last question, and then hopefully quickly 2 audience questions. Katrina, go for it.
Thanks, Michael. So our last question, I think you talked about this a little bit, is about planning around the downtown Burbank Metrolink station. So it's close to downtown, but it's stuck between the 5 and the Burbank channel. So it's very awkward for pedestrian access and bike access, especially along the Olive Avenue Bridge, which you were talking about. So could you say just a little bit more about the long-term plan to improve the bridge as well as pedestrian and cyclist access with Metrolink?
Yeah, so there is a long-term plan to demolish the Magnolia and Olive Street Bridge, but we're talking 5, maybe even 10 years out. However, we still have the elevator at the top of one side of Olive Street Bridge that goes right to the Metrolink. It is wildly inaccessible because it has like this weird jump lane that you have to cross sort of 2 lanes of traffic to get to before you can start walking up and there's no shade. And we are redoing the rails because like the rails are like below your waist. You could just trip and fall and you're in the freeway. It's a mess. But at the end of the day, I think there is an opportunity. The biggest opportunity is redoing downtown Burbank in and of itself. And if we can do that whole stretch of San Fernando and First Street in a way that is more desirable for people to walk to rather than drive to, you're going to see an increase in people taking that Metrolink to that station, and that's where the demand for the walking is going to come. So there's a couple plans in the process. Tala mentioned it. We have the downtown Burbank specific plan. A lot of that plan changes the way San Fernando is built. It's gonna, we have a proposal to take it down to 1 lane in one direction and move all of those little, what everyone had for the parking, not parking, the eateries in the parking spaces. So we took the parking spaces. Sorry, we're feeding the cats over here. What happened during the pandemic where we took little parklets and made them into eateries, we're going to try to do that permanently. So get rid of 1 lane of traffic and actually move all of that out. So it becomes like this downtown eatery space. And the First Street, the next street over, closer to the station, is having a huge project called the First Street Village. And that has been approved for years now. And it's a huge plan development, and they're going to redo everything along First Street and along Magnolia on that corner. And then once you cross Magnolia Bridge, there's another plan development, 777 Front Street, which is basically right next to the Metrolink station. And part of their plan development is to include an elevator on the Magnolia Street Bridge. So now you've got 2 elevators on both sides of the Metrolink, one on the Olive Bridge and then a new one on Magnolia to get down there. I hope the push for a walkable downtown, a very walkable downtown, is going to create a demand for people to take the Metrolink in ways that we haven't seen before. Because right now it's mostly commuters for work. That's who takes the Metrolink. People who work in the media district or work downtown. I want to see that change. I want to see folks starting to show up between 3 p.m. and 9 p.m. and eating dinner, hanging out, watching movies, that kind of thing. And I think that will help us really radically change the way the entire infrastructure around the Metrolink is operated and run and treated.
Thanks. I think we've got just a couple more minutes for some audience questions. So I'm going to turn it back over to Michael to load those up.
Yes, so really briefly, because I know we're almost at time. The first question is, what are your ideas on how to address the street racing issue in Burbank to make our streets safer for pedestrians, cyclists, and other drivers? And can you give an update on any city council work happening around this right now?
About a year ago, almost exactly a year ago, there was a huge car accident on Glen Oaks. If you don't know Glen Oaks in Burbank, it's if nobody's parked on the side of the road, it's basically 7 lanes of open highway for about 4.5 miles. And it's just a huge stretch where it's 7 lanes. There's no median, there's no obstructions, there's nothing in the roadway, it's wide open. So once the sun goes down, you get folks zipping along there. You know, they'll street race, they will. My big proposal, and this is my huge push for Glen Oaks Boulevard in Burbank, is to put in so many obstructions in that roadway that everyone who drives it is forced to slow down. I'm talking medians, bollards, signage, bulb outs, trees, anything and everything that you can put in the eye line of the driver. And this has been proven. This is statistically proven over and over again through major studies. If you put obstructions in the way of the driver, the natural instinct is to get your foot off the gas. You just do it. You won't feel comfortable racing. You just don't. And in fact, we don't have people racing along Glen Oaks south of where the median starts into Glendale, because there's trees and there's a curve and you can't see. And so people slow down. We know that it works on the south end of Glen Oaks, and now we need to implement that along the whole north side of Glen Oaks into Sun Valley. That's my big push. Now, we also have a lot of street racing in the hillside. Kenneth, Bel Air, Sunset Canyon. Those are all parallel to Glen Oaks, and people don't want to sit in the traffic in Glen Oaks. So they cut up to the big, those other streets, and they just gun it. That is prime real estate for more stop signs, turnabouts and roundabouts, bulb outs, speed bumps, all kinds of, again, obstructions and things in the way, so that you just have to slow down. We have been such an wild west of open car loving city for so long that we've built the infrastructure that says, yes, drive fast and never pay for parking. That's just what Burbank is known for, and that needs to change.
Very last question, 30-second answer if you can. Will the city of Burbank implement a bridge to job program similar to LA's targeted local hire program to increase job opportunities for those interested in working in the public sector?
Oh, wow. I have no idea. That's my 30-second answer, but I'd be happy to put something like that together.
Konstantine, thank you so much for being here. It's been a pleasure. And thank you for rolling with the tougher questions along with the easier ones and giving honest answers. Next month, we want to remind everybody, July 13th, 5 p.m., we'll have Supervisors to Lease. So we'll get those that event up shortly on our website. And have a good evening, everybody. Thank you so much.
Everyone. Bye.
Good night.